Alright kids, this video goes along with the uh, Warhead South assignment that you see on the screen over here on the right. For some of you who may have been absent, I wanted to provide you with this video so you could still hear the text and still participate in the assignment and get your credit. But what this is a reading from this book over here, King George, What Was His Problem?, which is a uh, whole hilarious story of the American Revolution. It's got a lot of funny anecdotes in it. I enjoy it as a book. I mean, I think it's a fun recreational read, but I'm a history guy. Anyway, I picked a few short passages out with this, and we're going to have a read aloud, or we did in class, and then we answered 2 questions for each passage. Each passage has a multiple choice question and then an open response question. So part 1 has these 2 questions that go along with it. Why did the king decide to try to capture the southern colonies? And the short open response, how did British citizens feel about continuing the war? Why? Part 1, the king tries the south. The first thing we have to do is take a look at things from King George's point of view. Mighty Great Britain had been fighting these pesky Americans since 1775, and all they had to show for it was control of New York City. The war was costing Britain a fortune, so much that the government had to raise taxes. King George was feeling the heat. More and more people in Britain were sick of war. They wanted to bring the army home and forget the whole thing. But you know George, he was still absolutely committed to victory over the Americans. So starting in 1779, the king decided to try a new strategy. The British army would destroy the revolution by capturing the southern states. The famously stubborn King George honestly believed that most people in the South were still loyal to him. Pause the video now while you answer those 2 questions, or go back and play it again, and in about 10 seconds I'm going to start the next set. Right, part 3 is titled British Behaving Badly. Your 2 questions are, what did the British soldiers take in particular from Eliza, and how might taking things from people like Eliza make the war worse for the British? Part 3, British Behaving Badly. If only the king knew how badly some of his soldiers were behaving in the South. One morning in 1780, a frightened girl came running up to Eliza Wilkinson's South Carolina home. "Oh, the king's people are coming!" shouted the girl. "It must be them, for they are all in red." Moments later, Eliza saw a group of British soldiers riding up to her house. "Where are these women rebels?" they cried, waving swords and pistols. The soldiers jumped off their horses, ran into the house, and started stealing stuff. Jewelry, clothes, pretty much anything that wasn't nailed down. Then one of the soldiers saw the silver buckles on Eliza's shoes. "I want them buckles," said he, and immediately knelt at my feet to take them out, which, while he was busy about, a brother villain whose enormous mouth extended from ear to ear bawled out, "Shares there! I say shares!" So they divided my buckles between them. A few minutes later it was all over. Eliza watched the British soldiers ride off, their shirts bulging with loot. This kind of thing was happening a lot, and as you can imagine, the British bandits were not exactly winning new friends for King George in the South. In fact, more and more Southern patriots began rising up against the invaders. Okay, pause the video, take a moment to answer those 2 questions, and then we'll get on to part 4 in about 10 seconds. Okay, part 4, the swamp fox. The questions are, why did they call Francis Marion the swamp fox? And if you were a British soldier, how might you feel trying to fight someone like Marion? Part 4, the swamp fox. That brings us to a South Carolina patriot named Francis Marion. Marion started leading small bands of militia members on quick surprise strikes against British soldiers. Marion would march through the night, attack sleepy British soldiers at dawn, then disappear into the forests and swamps, using paths and hiding places the British could never find. Marion never encamped over 2 nights in one place, said Tarleton Brown, one of Marion's men. The British hated Marion, but they couldn't help respecting his creative and daring style. They even gave him a nickname, the Swamp Fox. Even Continental Army soldiers hardly ever got a good look at the Swamp Fox. When Colonel Otho Williams met Marion and his swamp team, he was surprised to see a bunch of hungry-looking men in rags. Their number did not exceed 20 men and boys, said Williams, some white, some black, and all mounted on horses, but most of them miserably equipped. Miserably equipped, but very effective. With folks like the Swamp Fox around, the British Army was never able to gain control of the South. Again, pause the video and take a few minutes to answer those two questions, and then we'll get on to part 5. Part 5, Fight, Lose, Fight Again. Your two questions are, why did General Greene choose to fight, lose, and fight again? And then, do you think you could have handled what General Greene's army did? Why? General Nathanael Greene took command of the American army in the South at the end of 1780. And, like the Swamp Fox, Greene knew how to use geography to his advantage. His strategy was simple. We fight, get beat, rise, and fight again. Doesn't exactly sound like a formula for success, does it? Actually, it was brilliant. Greene knew his small army wasn't strong enough to actually beat the British, so instead he decided to lead the enemy on a long and tiring chase all over the vast spaces of North and South Carolina. Once in a while, he'd turn and fight a small battle, and he didn't mind losing these fights because he knew he was wearing the British down. Don't get the idea that Greene's army was having a great time, though. Facing the usual Continental Army food shortages, the soldiers ate frogs, alligators, or anything else they could catch and cook. And with all the marching and camping, the men wore completely through their clothing by summer's end. And at the Battle of Eutaw Springs, said General Greene, hundreds of my men were naked as they were born. Well, at least it was warm. All right, take a moment, answer those two questions. If you need to go back and play any part of the video again, feel free to do so, and then submit that once you have finished. Here's a map from the book that I just read. Kind of gives you an illustration of just how difficult a journey Greene forced the British Army to take on their way through the South, where they finally took a break at Yorktown. These notes will also be posted on the Google Classroom for you later.